Before I started making my LEGO wargame, when I was a kid, I really liked the Knights Kingdom 1 King Lion's Castle, King Leo's Castle, I forget its exact name. But anyway, it was this castle built on this big raised base plate, something that I think we might consider a little chunky and inelegant today, but I still love it, of course. Now, unfortunately, for me as a kid, I couldn't afford this castle when it was out, and I wasn't about to spend all of my Christmas and birthday money trying to buy it. So sadly, I had to settle for building it and recreating it in the LEGO Creator Knights Kingdom on the PC. Whoa, the 90s were a beautiful time. But then, lucky me, LEGO came around with Knights Kingdom 2. And what did they do in Knights Kingdom 2? They didn't re-release that old castle. They built a new castle on a raised base plate. And this thing was basically a fully upgraded version of that classic castle. I'm talking, of course, about the Castle of Morcia. And when this thing came out, I could afford it. I could get my hands on it. And most importantly, eventually, I could take it and convert it into buildings for my LEGO wargame. Greetings, Realm Lords, COR here, and today we're going to head over to the Kingdom Tech Tree because I'm going to be revealing the second building of the Cusped Kingdom. Now, I already released a short video that just shows how this building is built, and I was asking you guys for your input, what you thought its name was, what it did, and stuff like that, and I know a lot of you guys felt that this was a forward outpost. But that's actually not the case. I know it's got the look of a forward outpost thanks to that little parapet it's got on the top of it. That's probably a holdover of the fact that this building, like so many of the Kingdom buildings, actually ultimately comes from LEGO set 8781, which is the Castle of Morcia. And so I didn't want to stray radically far from that original design of the Castle of Morcia, although I definitely made some innovations on it when I converted it into a piece for my LEGO wargame. If you're new to this channel or you don't remember, the Cusped Kingdom faction is based very heavily on LEGO Castle's Knights Kingdom 2 series. That's the series with the colorful Power Ranger-like knights in it, and a lot of their buildings and units ultimately trace back to those waves of sets. This building in particular is based on one of the two front structures of the Castle of Morcia. Specifically, it's actually based on the catapult over on the left. Although you'll notice I removed that catapult from my building. I just kind of felt like a catapult was making this building a little bit too defensive. Plus, it's an awkward catapult. It's a very strange one to fire. It's kind of cool the way it works, but ultimately, it's not something I want to be messing around with my hands, and it's definitely not something my players, who don't quite have that same level of LEGO dexterity that, we LEGO builders have, it's not really something I want them messing around with either. Now, when I think about how to adapt the Castle of Morcia into buildings in my wargame, I have to think about the kind of units that the Cusped Kingdom has. And those units are based on those very colorful knights. We have figures that were originally Jaco the Hawk or Santis the Bear. And with all these different animals, I feel like there's something I have to grapple with when it comes to the buildings for this faction. How do I make buildings that look like they relate to these different characters from that wave? LEGO's original set is a very generically lion-themed castle. And its color scheme is this beautiful royal blue, which none of the knights happen to actually have. The only figure that has this royal blue at all in him is the king, who in our game is King Mateo de Leon. So I was kind of faced with a decision here. I could take this castle and I could break up its colors. We could not just have the royal blue, but maybe we could have a red section for our bear knights, a green section for our monkey knights, and so on and so forth. But then we run into a situation where not only do we have these rainbowish knights, which were already received in kind of a mixed manner, and then we're gonna have a rainbow castle too? I don't know. I didn't even bother mocking it up on Bricklink Studio just because I could already tell this is not really gonna be the way to go. This is not gonna look that good. I want the kingdom's buildings to have a unifying color scheme. Even if their individual units don't, the buildings should all look like they have the same colors. So if we look at the catapult at the front of the Castle of Morcia, I don't want to change the colors up on it. So instead I've got to think of another way to slip iconography in here. And I've already committed to this being our building for our bear knights. And after doing a little bit of thought about it, I decided the easiest way to do that is to just insert some sculpture. Make the building have a sculpture of a bear in it. And that's what I've been doing with the other buildings. The Aquiline Hall that we started with has a sculpture of an eagle on top of it. And so this building right here is going to have the sculpture of a bear face on it. I took the head design from some LEGO Chima set of a bear tank thing. I don't know, it's kind of honestly one of the most messed up LEGO sets I've ever looked at. But the bear head looked very good, and I felt like I could emulate that in gray to create a statue face. And that's what I did. So I've removed the catapult, and what's left is what? A bear outpost? It might look that way. But if we turn this building around, will see that on the other side, we actually do have some other details I've added in. I've placed in these little barrels here. And that's because this building isn't an outpost at all. It is actually a cellar. Hence the title of the building, which is the Ursine Cellar. Just like our Aquiline Hall has a very fancy word for eagle in it, our Ursine Cellar, of course, has a fancy word for bear. So how does this thing come together? What does it consist of? Well, let's take a look. Just like with the Aquiline Hall, we're going to be starting off with a terrain base. That is the first step of this building. It is basically just a grassy little plot of land that this structure will be built on. That's particularly important for these kingdom buildings because since they are built to be locked into that raised base plate, they aren't really built for the 6x6 grid that I use in my game. But I still wanted to make them compatible with that base, which means I basically need an adapter to get it to my 6x6 board, and that's what this terrain base is. That's what that step one really serves the purpose of, is adapting the grid to allow this building to slot down onto it. Step two is definitely where the build gets more interesting. That is where we have this bear head tucking out of the front of the building. So this building has a bear head on the front of it because it trains two important units for the kingdom player. One of them is our snazzy bear knights. Now our hawk knights, they're all about speed, they're all about agility. But our bear knights, they are all about raw power, raw strength. And they are led by a hero, Lord Lysander Ursaw, who himself is a strong powerhouse. But I don't want to spoil too much about Lysander and his knights because we're going to talk about them in another video. And on the back side, we have our 3 barrels showing us that it is a cellar. Now, why a cellar of all things? Well, for that, we've got to turn over to the lore of the Circle of Realms. So we've learned about King Matteo de Leon and his son, Prince Jalen, and the Aquiline Hall, and how the people love them, and how it's the seat of the capital, which is Eagle's Perch. And Eagle's Perch is very much what is signified when we build the kingdom player base on this raised base plate. But of course, there's more to the Cusped Kingdom than just Eagle's Perch and the king and his son. There are other important ruling families, and one of these families is the Ursaws. The Ursaws are an incredibly wealthy family that rule over the port city of Ebmer. Basically, all goods coming into the Cusped Kingdom are going to make their way through the port of Ebmer before they ultimately arrive at Eagle's Perch. And so, since the Ursaws control this port, and the Ursaws, of course, need a building for our kingdom player, I figured it would be great to have a cellar as their building. This is a place where the wine is brought that is imported through the port and stored in the keep. Now, I can hear what you're saying already. You're like, core bricks. You took a catapult and you turned it into a cellar? And that's a more interesting building for the kingdom player to have? I don't think so. Well, hear me out first. Our cellar's gotta have a cool ability, you know, like all of our other buildings do. The merchants are traveling to and fro between the port of Ebmer and the main castle of Eagle's Perch. And they're dropping off all the wine in this cellar. Or at least, that's what all the other teams think. But you know, this is a time of war in the Cusped Kingdom. And in a time of war, even your merchants that are bringing wine back and forth can help out your cause. And so items can be smuggled to and from this cellar. There's another building the Kingdom player has that I'll reveal at a later date, and that is the Kingdom Docks. This is basically the seaside building that the Kingdom player can build. And if you have both the Kingdom Docks and the Ursine Cellar, then you can smuggle items back and forth between the two. During a unit command on either building, you can immediately transport an item on top of one building to the other building. This is a valuable tool for the Kingdom player because the best place for the Kingdom player to build most of their buildings is actually very far away from the water. But if they can move items immediately between the docks and their main castle, then they can bring resources into the castle much more quickly. They can bring weapons in and out of the castle very easily. A particularly aggressive Kingdom player could even build their docks on the other side of the game board and really be warping items back and forth using that smuggling ability. Now, of course, that's just step 2 of the Ursine Cellar. There is a third step, and that is the roof of the building. It is also essentially a raised floor that units can walk up on top of. Now, there's not a ton to say about this upper level, but some people did notice that there is a mounted crossbow up there. And that's a snazzy item. It doesn't allow them to shoot flaming arrows, despite there being fire up there. I really just put the fire up there to give the building a nice symmetrical look. But what it does do is it increases the range of our units. A unit that is standing on top of the Ursine Cellar has their range increased to 5. So they can actually shoot units far away as if they are holding a crossbow. This is doubly effective for someone on top of the Ursine Cellar because they are standing just high enough to get a height advantage over any target they are shooting if their target is standing on the ground level. And of course, if the Ursine Cellar is on top of the raised base plate, then they're going to have height advantage of just about anything that comes anywhere near them. So when this whole building comes together, it does look a little stubby. It does look a little bit like a forward outpost if it is built on its little terrain base. And you know, quite frankly, that's because it really would be if it's built in that situation. If a Kingdom player is making the decision to build this building from the ground up, then they're definitely building it in a very forward position, a position that is notably more vulnerable than where it should normally be. This probably means that the Kingdom player has suffered a major attack or a major setback at some point in the game that's had them abandon their cliff starting area. But if that's not the case, if we're in a normal game, then our Kingdom player is going to be starting off and they're going to take advantage of the other ability this building has, which is of course its Marian architecture. Just like the Aquiline Hall could be built on the raised base plate instead of directly on the ground, so too can this Ursine Cellar be built on that raised base plate as well, in a different spot though. Locking in right where the original catapult went on the Morcian castle, our Ursine Cellar takes up a much more imposing position when it is on this raised base plate. And rather than looking like some skimpy little forward outpost, it actually does look like a nice fortified component of a much larger castle structure. So I have already basically talked about all the abilities of this building, but if you want to read them in detail, you can check them out at circleofrealms.com. I'll even link this building in the description so you can go to its page and check it out there. But I didn't do the stats, so let's go ahead and talk about those very, very quickly here. So as you've already seen, this is a 3-step building. Each of those steps has 4 hit points apiece. So that means its maximum hit points would be 12. And if it's actually built on that raised base plate, it's only going to be 8 because it's skipping step 1. Both its smuggler and mounted crossbow ability do not work if all 3 steps are not on the field. So if that top layer is blown away, you can't smuggle items between the cellar and the docks. You obviously can't use the crossbow because, you know, the crossbow's gone. That being said, our Ursine Cellar is a very affordable building. It only costs 200 gold, and it only requires 3 builders to assemble. It does have 6 siege armor, so it can actually take quite the beating before all of its health is gone. The Ursine Cellar is a Tech Age 2 building, and so it's not available in the initial phases of the game, but it doesn't take too long to get out. The 2 units that it makes, which we'll start looking at in the next video, are both made at Tech Age 2, so once you build this building, those units should be available to you. That hero, Lysander or Saw, he's a little bit more expensive. He does cost 800 gold. Most heroes cost around this much money. That said, the Bear Knights are only 150 gold apiece, making them no more expensive than the Hawk Knights that we can make at the Aquiline Hall. My friends, if you enjoyed this video and you enjoy this content, please don't forget to like and subscribe so you can see more of what is happening over here in the Circle of Realms. And if you've made it this far in the video, then you're someone who might be interested in supporting me on Patreon. I quietly had this set up at the very beginning when I first started making videos, but as I'm getting a little bit more comfortable with making videos and producing content, I feel a little bit more confident with putting that Patreon out there for you guys to sign up and, for less than I think a coffee costs these days.
That's $37.
You can support me a little bit and support this channel. Any money I bring in from that Patreon will go directly into the Circle of Realms, either into equipment that will help me film and produce higher quality content, or into the Lego parts and the things that I need to make that board as presentable and elegant as it can be for everybody. I've already been posting some exclusive updates in that Patreon. I am always working on things with this game every week, but I'm not always working on something that's going to translate into the next video, because my videos right now are about the very basics of the game, but I'm working on more advanced stuff that I still like to post and share little pictures of and descriptions of, so check out the Patreon to see more of that. But regardless, no matter what, my next video on these Baronites will come out, be released on YouTube for everybody to see, and whether you are Patreon subscribed, not subscribed, I hope you tune into that video and you enjoy it. But until then, my friends, be happy, be healthy, be well, and I will see you next time in the Circle of Realms.